We're talking about a boost of profit with just small changes, just how 1% can make a huge difference to your bottom line.
It's in my book, but I call it the 1% rule. And it says that if you can raise your nominal gross profit margin by 1%, the average company in the United States will increase its net profit by 14.5%. If your gross profit margin is 35%, you raise it to 36. In other words, you sell $1 million, you make $70,000 before taxes. If you increase your gross profit margin and you're already profitable, that increase will go directly to profit, unchanged.
Michael Gurley, he had a tweet recently that he was a speaker and he polled the audience, and they were all small business owners, how much of their retirement was in their business. And over 90% of the room raised their hand. And then 50% of the room said 98% was tied up in their business. And so if your retirement is tied up in your business, figuring out ways to get 1% better and increase the net profit that you have is huge.
Maybe we need to suggest some ways people might be able to do it. So,
expert advice, practical tips, real-life stories. Have less stress, more time, and more money in your business. Welcome to the Cash Flow Contractor.
Martin, it's officially been 1 month of no caffeine. I'm happy to report back that I had caffeine for the first time yesterday.
Really?
I did.
Why?
It was green tea.
Okay.
Just experimenting, I immediately, 5 minutes in, my brain's just like pulsing. Like
Really?
I could feel
You
it.
could feel it?
Oh, it could, without a doubt, it's a drug. And then I could only drink half the cup. I was like, I need to put pause. And I was extremely productive yesterday for a variety of reasons, but I do think the caffeine just helped me just like laser in.
Wow. Should have had a Red Bull. Then you really...
Oh, I probably would have died. I probably would have been bad news. But anyways, it was a boost of energy for me. Today we're talking about a boost of profit with just small changes. So we mentioned this, I believe, in one of our recent episodes of just how 1% can make a huge difference to your bottom line. So maybe let's start with that really quick. And you have some clear numbers on that. Let's start with that. And then we'll kind of get into these 10 strategies.
Yeah. We've talked about it before. It's in my book, but I call it the 1% rule. And it says that if you can raise your nominal gross profit margin by 1%, the average company in the United States will increase its net profit by 14.5%. So, first of all, when we talk about the nominal gross profit margin, we're talking about if your gross profit margin is 35%, you raise it to 36, right? Or if it's 40, you raise it to 41. And the reason it works is the average company in the United States is profitable at a level of 7%. In other words, you sell $1 million, you make $70,000 before taxes. And if you can increase your gross profit margin, if we had a little whiteboard here, we could show how it works. But if you increase your gross profit margin and you're already profitable, that increase will go directly to profit, unchanged. So if you had $1 million worth of sales, you got a margin of, or you have a net profit of 10%, you increase your gross profit margin. It'll increase your gross or your net profit by $10,000, 1% of the sales. So anyway, it's there. And the big advantage of that is that 1%, I've never met anybody who said, I can't do 1%. Right?
Yeah.
If the target is to increase sales by, you mentioned it in one of our recent episodes, by 15%, that's a daunting task. I mean, that's really hard to do. It's really hard to do profitably because you usually involves price concessions to do that. But anyway, it's really hard. But 1%, people can do that. And then I'm always saying that. And then what we got to talking and said, maybe we need to suggest some ways people might be able to do it. So,
yeah. And these are not going to be exhaustive by any means, but I think they're great starting points. And we'd love to hear if we're missing some obvious ones or there's any ideas out there that you've used or implemented. We'd love to hear from you on these as well. One thing I wanted to bring up again that we've talked about in the past is just how much easier it is to not take on some of the expenses rather than to cut them out. So if you just don't take them on in the first place, I was reading what was it? Paul Graham. Do you know Paul Graham? He's the
No.
founder of Y Combinator, a huge Silicon Valley startup incubator. Anyways, he has this like one page of how to start a startup. And, it covers everything from like, people, the idea, hiring, all this kind of stuff on there. And it's one page and it's normal formatting, like 12-point font and everything. There's a whole
So
section on
it's not real hard to start a business in.
there's a whole section on not spending money.
Yeah.
And so that's how important it is. And his whole point was, when you don't spend money, it gives you more at bats. The faster you burn through your money, the more likely you are to fail faster. And so if you spend less money, then you get more opportunity to try to figure out a way to succeed, right? And then I was also reading, we had Michael Gurley on the show back in the day, I think episode 200, and he had a tweet recently that he was at a big workshop or he was a speaker and he polled the audience, and they were all small business owners, how much of their retirement was in their business. And over 90% of the room raised their hand. And then 50% of the room said 98% was tied up in their business. And so if your retirement is tied up in your business, figuring out ways to get 1% better and increase the net profit that you have is huge. I mean, it's literally your longevity. It's how you're going to, retire, take care of your family, do the things you want to do in life. So huge thing to think about is just ways to boost profit. A lot of these are going to be around cutting expenses, but if you can find ways to not even take on the expenses in the first place, that's probably the biggest boost to profit you can have, especially as, even with some of these ways to boost profits, it's increasing revenue. Don't just add cost, because then you negate that in the first place. So let's jump in. So first one, this is probably the most obvious one to most listeners. So why don't you go for it, Martin?
Well, one thing you can do that will increase your gross profit margin by 1% is raise your prices by 1%. And that is different than selling 1% more, because if you sell 1% more, you bring along with that sale additional variable costs. If you raise the price, whatever you raise your price goes, as long as you're profitable above break even, whatever you raise your price to goes directly to the bottom line.
Yeah.
So, and I don't find too many people, we find a lot of people who are loath or reluctant to raise their prices, but just about everybody thinks they could raise their prices 1%, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's totally a doable one. I think also with that, finding ways to sell more to that same customer is another great one that kind of falls in lines with this. Is you can either raise your prices on what you're already selling them, or you can sell more to the same customer as a way of gaining more revenue, because those are the two ways that you can increase your revenue, is selling more or selling more to the same people.
But the problem with just viewing it as selling more is it does bring cost with it.
There's cost with it. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you can absolutely do it, but a 1% price increase really is free money. It just comes in the door, falls all the way through all your expenses, and comes out in your bank account. And an interesting thing here too is that if you can do 1% increase in margin raises your profit 14.5. Well, if you're starting out at 7%, 2% raises your net profit 29%. It works that way.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't always work that way, because after you get really profitable, you're not at 7% net profit anymore. But yeah, go for it. If you're going to raise it 1, go ahead and raise it 2. If you're going to raise it 2, go ahead and raise it 5 until you hit the point where you freak out and don't do it.
Well, and I think it's important for listeners to, there's inflation going on. people feel that in a real way. I think there's a justification for raising prices, and anytime there's a justification for it, you need to take advantage of it, because that's probably one of the biggest areas of head trash for a lot of owners, of just like, I can't raise prices, I'll lose the customer. And then what am I going to do after that? And then, and most times you can afford to lose the customers. You even have a price increase calculator of how much business you can afford to lose when increasing your prices. But yeah, I think that's a really great one. So let's jump to the next one. Pass along credit card charges is a great one. And this just is, in general, changing how you process payment, maybe,
Right.
is another good topic. But I know a lot of contractors are pretty stiff on, we're going to use a check because we don't want to deal with that. But some of the smaller ones, especially small service contractors, are doing the credit card charges. What are you seeing?
I haven't written it down and studied it, but it appears to me that most people will take credit cards.
Okay.
I think quite
Depends
a
on the
few
size of the
now.
job.
Yeah, but some of that depends on the size of the job. Somebody's gone through one of these finance companies and
Yeah.
they charge you 3%. It's not a credit card, but it's 3%. There is a point where typically credit cards are going to take 2.5 to 3%, right?
Yeah.
So if you stop taking charges, it wouldn't necessarily increase your net profit, that multiple of 3%, because you don't take credit cards on everything. But on average, it's maybe costing you 1%. So
Yeah.
quit doing it. A lot of people already do. And by quit doing it, I mean, add it back. Hey, it's $100. If you give me a check, it's 103 if you use a card. There are people who price the card into it and then just don't say anything if they give you a check. In other words, you don't discount for a check. That's fine. But I'm kind of saying, hey, if you can raise your prices 3%, go raise your damn prices 3%.
Yeah.
Just do it. Right.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I think there's pushback sometimes on some customers, and maybe those are customers you need to fire or not work with, but of, you're going to charge me more to use a credit card? Like, that's just the cost of doing business or whatever. Um, But I think you're even seeing it honestly at like restaurants and coffee shops, like they're adding back for credit card fees. I see it all the
Yeah.
time. So I think people are understanding that that's costing more and more just to process payments, and 3% at the end of the day of your top line revenue
Yeah.
is a big deal.
Well, when you figure that the average company makes 7%
Yeah.
as net profit, the 3% now is factored into that. But what would it be if it weren't there?
Yeah.
I would love to have started a business where I got 3% of all the transactions that make up the United States economy or the world's economy.
It's a real thing. Stripe is
Yeah.
a multi-billion-dollar company for a reason. Visa and MasterCard are crushing it.
Where every,
Square. Yeah. I think another thing to think about with this is, in terms of credit card fees, moving to a credit line at a bank rather than using your credit card for payments, if you're doing that, is a huge deal as well, because the interest
yeah.
rate's completely different. So that may be another way of reducing some of those expenses, by just getting a really good relationship with a bank or multiple banks, having credit lines and operating on those rather than on credit cards, where you're paying fees if you're not, tying them out each month. So this is an interesting one that I think we learned from, was it Will Blake, or did you learn this next one from someone?
No, Will Blake did this. He's been
Yeah.
on our show. It
He's
was
been on our show. I
great.
don't know if we have the video up, but it's one of our first episodes we did. We may need to get him back on. But number 3 is install vending machines in the shop. So Will was just tracking his vehicles, which, if you're not tracking your vehicles, we did some fleet management episodes. Really valuable thing that you can get from your fleet management is knowing where your guys are. And the first stop for all the guys is going to the gas station. And they would spend sometimes 45 minutes there pumping gas, getting snacks, getting their coffee for the day. Well, he was done with that and basically put vending machines in the shop where he priced things even really low, where it was like more advantageous to get things from the vending machine than going to the 7-Eleven. And then they would have drinks and coffee, and everything was there where they could show up in the shop, grab everything in 5 minutes, and then head out the door and get to the job
Gone.
site.
Yep.
So I think that's a huge one. And, obviously it adds a layer of complexity to where now we've got to go to Sam's Club or Costco twice a week to restock all this stuff. And someone's got to be in charge of it. And you got to manage it. But what's the benefit? I mean, what do you remember what Will
Yeah.
said in terms of the
Well,
productivity rate?
no, don't don't really remember the numbers, but I think he's at 9 trucks with 4 guys on each truck, and figure it's an hour, at least an hour a day, because you stop on the way out and you stop on the way in.
Right.
That's what. But anyways, and stop doing that. That's another job a week per truck, 9 trucks. I mean,
Yeah.
just calling it out as an average. That will increase your margin because your cost, your labor cost of doing those jobs will effectively go down
Yeah.
because you can spread your labor cost, your variable labor cost over more jobs.
Hmm. And so that's point 3. Point 4 is tied directly into this, which I'd
Right.
never heard of. Who did you hear this one from?
You mean the fuel?
Yeah.
Oh, I've got a couple of people doing it.
Okay.
There are fuel suppliers, and I'm sure our listeners, well, I presume they might have heard of it. They will come to your shop at night and fill your trucks and your equipment, anything that needs fuel. Um, and so everything's completely full in the morning when people come up. So it's the same thing.
Same
No,
idea.
no, yeah, same idea. You don't have to stop anywhere. They'll fill your gas cans, and you think, "Wow, that must be really expensive." It is not. I mean, I can't quote the numbers right now, but we've sure looked at it. I think one guy, I don't remember how many trucks he had, but he paid $150 a month to be in the program, and then he bought the gas. And the
Oh,
gas is comparable to what you pay for it at the station.
yeah.
So,
Seems like a no-brainer.
so anyway, that with the snacks, and you just eliminate those convenience store stops.
Yeah. No, those are 2 really good ones where you're just making your operations run a little bit smoother so that you can be more profitable, cutting out wasted time, essentially. Okay. So our point number 5 is buyback inventory. And this makes sense. I don't know that I've really heard about this, but you were talking to me about it with the concrete contractor. Is that right?
No, he's a flooring guy,
Okay,
but I think
flooring.
it'll apply to a lot of different contractors. It wasn't my idea. I was surprised when we were looking for ideas, and this is one he implements. Leveling concrete, sand, quickcrete, grout, bags of supplies that they haul to a job. There's more than that, caulking guns, all that. It's a lot easier at the end of the job just throw that in a dumpster
Right.
than it is to load it up, bring it back. Well, he's got a program where he buys it back. They bring the material back. If a bag of Quickcrete costs $8, he gives them $1, but they get extra money. The job gets cleaned up, and he has the material he paid $1 for it instead of 8. And
Hmm.
you can argue, as I'm sure listeners, bring the damn stuff back anyway. It's part of your job. Okay, well, make sure they do, right?
Yeah.
I just thought it was a good idea. And that's not theory. He's doing that. And, he didn't tell me how many millions he saved, but he said he's still doing it.
Wow.
He pays cash for it.
No, I think just squeezing as much as you can out of your inventory is great there. And not having your cash tied up as well in inventory there. Because he's not only just saving the expense there of having to buy new material at the $8 per bag, right? But he's also not having $7 tied up in inventory. He's having $1 tied up in
Right.
inventory. So
Yeah.
more cash savings there as well. Okay. So number 6, setting clear labor hours in bids. Um, how common is this practice? I don't do much with bidding, but never seen that.
Well, first of all, if you're bidding a job as the owner or the estimator, you're going to come up with the hours required in the job. That's you.
Right.
If not, then you got some places to work on. But you're coming up with some standard that you think
Sure.
the guy should be able to do it in this amount of time. Well, it's very common that somebody comes up with a requirement, but they don't tell anybody.
Yeah,
So the
exactly.
guys out on the job don't even know what's expected of them. And so when you bring those two together, I have quite a few contractors who do that. When the guys know what the job, hey, we've got 300 man hours allotted to this job. And the estimator has an opportunity to learn that somebody comes back and says, are you crazy? We can't do that in 300 hours. Well, at least there's some discussion there.
Right.
And the guys are responsible for getting it done on time. They deserve to know what's expected of them. If you're over there thinking they're going to do it in 100 hours and the seasoned foreman's out there looking and going, man, this is a 350-hour job, you're not on the same page. So both of you have an opportunity to adjust if you set the hours and make them known. The other thing that people do is offer guys the opportunity. So you have a fixed labor budget for a job and you say it's going to take 100 hours. If they can do it in 90 hours, you pay them the full amount for the job. You say, well, why would I do that? I'm giving away what I could have made. He said, yeah, but you're controlling cost overruns, which are way more common. And two, once again, you will have freed up 10 hours, in my example, of time for your guys that they can go do more work, right?
Yeah, because you're basically double dipping there. If you're putting them on another job, you're profiting from both, which is great, but you should also reward your team in that respect as well.
Right.
It's almost like the pay for performance at that level.
It is. Yeah. And it's not mathematically, it doesn't work out quite the same way as if you pay everybody the bid amount every time, you're not going to save 1%. But the problem is that the observed actual labor is almost always significantly higher than the bid labor. And so you think you're paying the same, but you're actually paying less because people had incentives to get the job done more quickly and make the same amount of money.
Yeah.
Or if you find another job for them, make more money.
Yeah.
So anyway, it works. It works.
Okay. So number 6 is set clear labor hours in your bids. Let's go to number 7, change orders. Let's talk about change orders. Where do you see people going wrong with change orders? Let's start there.
I don't know anybody who uses change order. It's kind of true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody talks about change orders, but maybe it's just the folks I run with, or handshake change orders. Yeah, we'll do that.
I feel like it's usually a concession more than a change order. Right. You know what I mean?
I see your point. Yeah.
Yeah. Just, oh, sure, we'll do that. Or yeah, we can make that happen and nothing changes. Okay. So
except the scope.
The scope changes, but nothing else changes.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend in terms of change orders?
Well, change orders need to be, have adequate information, what the date was, describe the project that you're changing. You price the project that is changing. Any terms, like do they have to pay it down before you go buy custom stuff, things like that. The effect of the change on the timeline. In other words, if they now want shutters on all their windows, that's going to add a week because you got to go get the shutters, make them whatever it is. So you need that information, and it needs to be in writing, and it needs to be signed. And that's where a lot of it is a hiccup, because you're talking with a customer on the phone and they want to extend the patio or do whatever it is they want changed that they've decided. Well, somehow you got to go. We have DocuSign now, but somehow you got to go get that signed. And the big effect of it is people don't remember what you said early on. A project that's taken 3 weeks, a month, and you started out adding, 35 square feet of concrete to the patio. You don't even remember it, but you're going to get the bill for it, right? Yeah. So if you want to increase margins, change orders, signed, documented, fully fleshed out change orders are huge. You wouldn't find a big, hugely successful company anywhere that's going to make any scope changes without signed, probably have board approval from the customer. we will pay this, right?
Right.
So it's
Well,
an important step.
it is. And I think another area that can go wrong with the change orders is not charging a premium for them. I think it's important that if the scope of work changes, it not only changes what you're doing that day, but it kind of ruins plans. If you're going to be there for an extra week, that changes what you have to do with the other job. It means you may lose the other job. I mean, there's a
Right.
level of risk that you're incurring
Yeah, it's
for that
disruptive.
change order. And so you need to charge a premium for it, almost like you would charge overtime hours for it. And a lot of times that may impact where they don't do the change order. And that's great. That means that you're still going to be profitable the way that they said, you know? But also, you're under contract. If you're doing drywall and you're on contract to do the job and then they make a change and yeah, well, we're charging at a premium. It's not like they're really just going to go find another drywall contractor to come do that one piece. They're going to negotiate with you, and you probably just need to stick to your guns as much as possible. And say, hey, like we don't have to do this change order. We've got plans here that we can still complete at that price, but if we do this change order, this is
Yeah.
what it will cost. So I think that's probably an area that if you're not really strict on change orders and adhering to the scope of work and documenting everything, if you implement a change order process for your team, that can go a long way in
Yeah.
increasing your profit. Okay, so let's go to number 8. Maintain accurate and updated bidding costs. There's
Yeah.
some pretty cool software out there that can help with some of this stuff. I know for some roofing companies and other remodelers, they're using Xactimate. Um, and it's essentially a nationwide database of what materials cost every single place in the US. Like you can get down to the city. If I'm going to Home Depot, what is the cost of sheetrock for, just a one piece of sheetrock, right? Every and so basically you can build out all of your bids with accurately updated pricing every month, I believe, is when they update it
Yeah, it goes
using
out
that
and
software.
scrapes all those
Yeah.
websites, right?
Well,
And
yeah, and then it's directly linked into you can build out an Xactimate and send it directly to the supply house, I believe, and they'll fulfill the order. So it's tied in directly to the supply houses as well.
well, I knew a guy about 8 years ago in Colorado. He was a client for a while, software developer, and that's what he was doing, building software to go scrape prices for
Yeah.
people. And I don't know if he's still around or not.
Well, it'll even do
Sounds
labor
like,
too. Like, what is labor typically like right now for, the industry? They're doing market research and stuff like that. And usually I've heard pushback from some people like, man, it's expensive and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like
uh,
just build it into your your pricing because it's going to help you. It's going to save you from
well,
misbidding.
the reason this is on here, and we're talking about saving 1%, you can save a lot more than that routinely, because I'm always keenly interested in how people bid jobs.
Hmm.
Where did you get that number? I like to find the actual cost of things, labor hours, there's an estimate in there, but material, what's it actually cost? And then divide it by 0.6 to get a 40% margin, whatever our margin is. But that's not what people do. Some people do, but that's not what everybody does. They will have some rule of thumb that they've always carried around in their mind about
Yeah.
how much a yard of concrete costs laid in a 4-inch patio, or uh, how much does a dumpster cost? I mean, they have these numbers, and then they do things like, well, if I'm going to charge for concrete, I got to charge for the guy that's going to put it in too. Anyway, so you got this kind of composite number that's got material costs and labor costs. Pretty soon, you really don't know what things cost you.
Yeah.
But maybe when you first put that spreadsheet or whatever method you're using to keep track of it together, it was pretty good. Pretty soon that was a month ago, and pretty soon that was 6 months ago, and pretty soon you've updated some of it, but some of it's been there for a year, and you have completely lost control of your costs. And the
Mhm.
way it hurts you is you're going to get billed at the higher, and they're usually higher. You're going to get billed at the higher rate, whether you updated your spreadsheet or not. So making sure of your cost, that really in bidding And in successful business, one of the first things is you have to know your cost, period. You
Wow.
just, that should seem obvious, but a lot of people don't. So trying to find a way to, and Xactimate sounds perfect.
Yeah, it's literally what all the insurance providers use whenever they do claims and getting an estimate of what they're going to give you on your money. Usually they're undercutting that, and then if a contractor has Xactimate, they can help you on your claim, say, "Hey, this is exactly what it's going to cost to do."
Right.
And then State Farm's like, "Okay, you're right." And they raise it.
Oh, our mistake.
Our mistake. Yeah.
Rounding error.
Round
Yeah.
by
Always down.
$10,000 on the $15,000 job. Anyways, okay, well, I think this one ties directly into point 9. I'm calling it point 9, Martin, but job cost accounting. So, why don't you just explain job cost accounting? Because I think we all know how hard it is just to keep really good books, but to go that extra step of doing job cost accounting. Can you explain the benefit?
Well,
I think we have some episodes on this, but
job cost accounting means that every dollar of revenue is assigned to a job, not just revenue. It came from this job, and every cost, every expense, labor, materials, and commissions, and so on, are allocated to that job. So you can see, did I make money? Did I make a margin on this job? And where it's really, really useful is we sit around and think, oh, I'm bidding these at 40% with a 40% margin, or Tom Reaver says 50% margin, or 35% margin, whatever you bid it for. Then you go look at your books after the job's all done, if you've done job costing, and you find out, oh, what I actually made was 12. I'm thinking of a literal example right now in my head. So that's an opportunity to manage your business and understand and say, how did my 40% estimate become a 12% reality? And that has to be in real time. It's not much use to look back at your records from 4 years ago and go, oh, we really blew it on that job.
yeah.
If we're doing it real time, doing it currently, you're finding out. I mean, Deming says you can't measure or can't manage what you don't measure.
Mhm.
And if you're not measuring by profitability per job, you can't manage it in a discussion. So it's an opportunity to take a look, get better at your bidding, and get your margins up.
Yeah, I think with the job cost accounting, it's a heavy lift for a lot of people because it's so integrated between your books and your operations, and it can be just a challenge. But I think if you find the right bookkeeper, if you use the right software, I know Builder Trend for any remodelers out there is a great one that if you do it right, you can get your job costing in there and your bidding costs in there to really, be streamlining that process. But if you're not tracking it, you don't know if you're profitable on that project or not. I think another thing to mention with this and with all of these is just the timing of things, of how, yes, you may be profitable on that job, but just the timing of this can affect your bottom line at net profit in terms of every month having that overhead kick over. And so getting better at a lot of these things, if you can just get things tighter in your timeline, you'll notice a higher net profit for that too on the monthly
Absolutely.
basis. So last one, point 10, using checklists. We had I think a whole episode on checklists way back when, but I've got an interesting analogy, but I'll let you start. What are checklists and why are they important?
Well, a checklist, what they're not is a set of steps to do a process. That's not what they
It's
are.
not an SOP.
It's not an SOP, but it is something that will refresh people's memories in major categories. And what I like to think of is a truck leaving for a job. They have fuel, they will if they filled up overnight with the contractor. But do they have did they have the address? Do they know where they're going? Do they have the materials they need? And the checklist, the way we described it in a prior episode, is really you got 4 guys in a truck, there are 4 guys standing around tailgate and go, okay, do we have the address? Do we have the material that we need? Do we have the generator and the gas? Do we have the special tools that we need? And 4 people nod, look at each other and nod. They may still miss something, but it's going to be all four of them, right? Well, that not having to come back. I mean, everybody listening, if you've been contracting for more than a week, you completely understand how it just destroys everything. If you go to a job, number of miles away and forgot whatever it was, right? And you have to go back to the shop. You got four guys doing make work, busy work, while you go get what you forgot. So checklists are just huge for every part of it, but very easily can save you 1% in your margins.
Yeah. What was the book, Martin, that you had on checklists?
Checklist Manifesto
Checklist
by
Manifesto.
a guy, East Indian name, can't remember it, but
Yeah, one of the
really
things
good.
he talked about there that was the analogy I was going to give, but or the story, but he talked about the importance of checklists in the medical profession and how it completely saves lives. And I think one of the easiest things that they implemented was someone wearing a vest when they're working on medications, of just like, hey, if this person's wearing a brightly colored vest, it means they're dosing medication, and you do not talk to them when they're wearing it. And that was just like a standard.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then there was a process of like double checking that it was the correct amount of dosage. Because there's so many horror stories of people just not doing well with medication, and they pass away. I remember one of my mom's best friends passed away because she was
Bad
going
dosing.
through chemotherapy and was doing great. Everything went well. And they give you potassium as you're doing chemotherapy, like a small amount of potassium, because it helps with the recovery
Does something.
process. It does
Yeah,
something. I don't know the
yeah, yeah.
process, but essentially the nurse at the end was like, it was the last of multiple treatments. It's like, oh, we haven't been giving you your potassium. Like, let's just do all the doses of your potassium over the
Oh,
course of the last, few months. At the end, like, we here, just take this. Completely destroyed her friend's esophagus and died 2
killed
months
her.
later from just a
Wow.
terrible situation. So that's why checklists matter. But yeah, it helps with just doing things right. So then you're not going to have to go back and fix things. And then it also helps with just, the trips that you're taking day in and day out. It keeps people on the same page as well. So I think the checklist, maybe even before the SOPs, are worth developing, because it's just a baseline. And then you
Oh,
can
yeah.
develop the SOPs after that.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Or checklist can affect, you can create a checklist and it works tomorrow morning.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can put it in paper and laminate it. And then everybody will know you're serious.
Yeah. Well, and I
It's a
think
laminated checklist.
with a lot of these things that we mentioned, it's really important that you get your team involved. You tell them what the goal is. Hey, our goal is 1% better, and let them know that, and explain all the ways that you plan on implementing uh, these strategies, or any strategies for reducing costs and increasing profitability, so that they feel bought into it, right? I think that's really the power of not just trying to do it all by yourself, but getting everybody involved on it is it keeps people motivated. It gives them something to like look forward to, and to then see the fruit of their labor at the end of the day, I think is excellent as well. So um, easier said than done, but once you do it, it can become really a fighting call for everybody.
But once you become aware, and that's the reason we're talking about the gain from 1% change, because everybody's aware that if I double my gross profit margin, double my sales, I'll probably make more money. Not necessarily, but probably. But to 1%, but that sounds insurmountable. 1% is not insurmountable. You can you can just do it. We're wasting 1% right now. I don't know exactly how, but if we set our minds to it, we can figure out, well, hey, we're wasting time and money. And
Yeah.
that's true on, you know, it never stops a little bit like 2-second lean. Just you keep looking for new ways. You can make a contest with your guys and pay a little bonus.
Yeah. Well, few little tips for listeners that may want to go and implement all 10 of these ways to make small changes and boost your profit. I think the biggest thing is just one thing at a time. Focus on a specific area, implement it, monitor how it's working, see if it actually made a difference, and then tweak from there before you go on to the next thing. If you try to do it all at once, it's going to be overwhelming for you, but also it's probably going to go over the head of your employee and your team. So your employees and your team. So yeah, figure out which one you're like, man, we really need to implement that. Implement it, see how it works, monitor the progress, track the results, and see if it needs to be further tweaked, or you can move on to the next one. But any other final thoughts you have, Martin?
My final thoughts are it's easy to raise your prices 1%. And if you raise your prices 1%, you can't simultaneously discount 20%. So your natural inclination to discount that's overcut. So we're way ahead there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Raise your prices 1%. You can do it right now. Do it on your next call.
Well, there you go. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. If there's other changes, if any of those stuck out to you and you'd like us to do a full episode on one of those small changes, be happy to do that. If there are some small changes that you've implemented to increase your net profit that we haven't discussed today, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out via the show notes. And yeah, thanks for listening. See you around, Martin.
See ya, Cleo.
Thanks for tuning into the Cash Flow Contractor. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Visit thecashflowcontractor.com. See you next episode.